So Blaine, thank you so much for allowing me to ask you some questions. You are a fellow pastor in the Reformed Church. You're serving a congregation in Queens, New York. How has COVID-19 affected your church and your ministry?
Like it has with so many churches, we've been shut down effectively for a month and a half now. March 15th was the last Sunday that we gathered in person for worship. And after that worship service that day, our consistory, our governing board, decided that was going to be it. And we were going to have to figure out what was next. And so we've been streaming our services online since that point. The one ministry that we continued after March 15th was our women's shelter. Once a week, we host upwards of 10 women who do not have homes. We provide a meal for them. We provide a safe shelter for them. That continued for a couple more weeks before the city shut that down as well because of an outbreak of COVID-19 among the homeless population. So they began to sequester them in different parts of Manhattan instead of sending them to different places in the 5 boroughs. And since that's been closed down, either we're doing stuff online or we're not doing it at all right now. So our Bible studies happening online. We're doing a midweek prayer gathering with some church members. Consistory meetings are happening online. And then we stream our Sunday worship service with a virtual coffee hour that follows, just for a chance for people to say hello to each other. And on the one hand, it seems like we're doing a lot less, but it also feels like it's taking a lot more time and energy to just do what we're doing right now. And so that's kind of where we're at ministry-wise right now. At this point, this is last week of April. Our consistories just said we're not planning to worship or open the facility at least through the end of June. And so we have at least 2 more months in this current reality. But more realistically, we're talking about post-Labor Day, sometime in the fall. And it might even be where we begin to open up for some smaller gatherings in the latter part of the summer before we get back to public worship at some point in the fall.
So being in one of the hot spots for the virus, has that been particularly difficult for you or for the church, or have you not been much affected by what was going on in the city, etc.?
So I think it's pretty hard to miss right now. We've had a handful of church members who have been diagnosed with COVID-19. At this point, all of them have either recovered or still are recovering, but are probably on the upward swing at this point. But we've probably had 4 or 5 family members of church members pass away during this season from COVID-19. And as I talk with people more and more, it's hard to see, or it's hard to talk with someone who has not had a loved one pass away, either a friend or a family member or a neighbor. And that would be true for most of my church members. It's even true for myself, other people I talk to. So while we're not in the heart of it, next to like Elmhurst Hospital, which has been in the news quite a bit, it does seem to has seemed to spread its tentacles throughout the entire city. And it's kind of hard to miss right now or to avoid.
As you look towards the future, what concerns you most?
My concern for both the local church, but probably also for the global church right now, is if this is a prolonged closure, how long can churches survive? There are certain costs that remain, whether or not you're gathering for public worship. And so kind of my long-term worry is how do we continue to fund ministry in this new reality if this is a prolonged thing? The advent of the technologies we have today have been incredible, which have allowed us to connect, to continue to worship together in a different way, but still able to worship together, to pray together, to study scripture together, to encourage each other. And those are all good things, but I think everyone is looking forward to the day where physical bodies can gather and worship again. Um, and my worry is just, can we get to the other side of all this? How long will it take to get to the other side of all this? Will churches end up merging? Will churches end up closing? Will churches, all these things are kind of wrapped up together. I think it's become clear that churches are needed in these times to provide some sort of stability, foundation, spiritual wisdom to people. But we've got to figure out how we're going to do that if this is the new reality for the foreseeable future.
Is there anything in particular that gives you a hope for the future?
Yeah. That first Sunday that we said we were going to move to online worship, that first Sunday we streamed on Zoom, and we'd send out all the information to the congregation about this is how you access Zoom, this is what you'll need to log in. And when I started the stream that day, and there were already some of our members who are in the upper 80s and lower 90s who have been able to figure out technology and to adapt. There's a certain resilience and adaptability in the church. The church has probably been known more for its inability to change and to adapt. And yet this is in many ways forced us to, and people are doing it. People are doing it because worship is important for them, because community is important to them. That there's this resilience that gives me hope that we'll figure out a way. We don't know what that way is yet, but because of the commitment of the church members, the loyalty they have, that they're going to find a way to make this work.
As a pastor, let me ask you this. If someone was sitting wondering, with all that's happening around the world with the pandemic, is God judging us? Is God punishing us? Is this just a wake-up call? Is this a sign of the times? How would you answer that question?
I would say none of the above, but God is suffering with us. We just made it through Holy Week, where we reflected on the final week of Jesus' life. One of the prophets says that he was a man of sorrows, a man acquainted with sorrows. Jesus went into the depths of human suffering, from betrayal to injustice to death in one of its most cruel forms. Jesus has gone through suffering with us and also for us. The resurrection is Jesus coming to the other side of suffering. He's made it through the evil and the darkness and the death that confronts us as humanity. And Jesus is making a way through our suffering for us to the other side. I would say that God is suffering with us, and Christ is pulling us through to the other side, whatever that other side might look like, but that God is with us in our suffering.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For those who might be watching, anything you can share with them to better understand what it is a pastor might be going through, during this time, and especially you who you're a young pastor, you have a young child in the house. How can you help them better understand what pastors are going through?
I would say first, pastors are humans. And so everything that you're experiencing as a human being, your pastor is probably experiencing as well. The disorientation, the uncertainty, the fear, the worry, the adapting to new schedules, work schedules, or children's schedules, everything that you're going through, pastors are going through as well. I think one thing to recall with pastors is one of our primary callings is to be with you as members of the congregation, to be with members of our community. And right now, that physical being with is, we're not able to do that. And so trying to be with grieving families has looked very different over the past 6 weeks than it typically would. A couple of church members, their father passed away. The funeral was last weekend, and we got to the end, and I just wanted to hug everyone. And we weren't able to do that. We could just stand at a distance and nod our heads and wipe away our own tears. And that's hard for pastors to not necessarily be able to do the job that we think we're called to do during this season. And the third thing would be we also missed one of our high holy days, our high holy weeks as pastors. A week that I always look forward to, culminating in Easter worship, and that was a loss, I think, for all of us that we experienced. And so we miss our congregation members. We miss the small talk at coffee hour. We miss the richness of worship. We miss being with you. And I think that is having a toll on all human beings, but I think it's having a toll on pastors as well.
Blaine, finally, how can people better pray for pastors and the church during this time?
My prayer has been this, that we would not grow weary or faint under the circumstances. That God would sustain us, give us the energy that we need, wipe away our tears of grief, to strengthen us when we need strength, to encourage us when we need courage. All of those things, that we would not grow weary if this is prolonged for a period of time here, but that we might be able to keep the faith and to keep the community faith alive with the living hope we have in Jesus.
Thank you so much for spending some time with me and allowing me to zoom in just a little bit on what life has been like for you in the midst of this crisis. I really appreciate it, and I pray for you and your church, and thank you so much.
Thanks for this opportunity, Albert. I appreciate it.